Good Sunday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for February the 26th. Today we are reading together in Exodus chapter 15, which is the first chapter post what we have seen of the miraculous events that took place following the Exodus and the Red Sea. Now what we're going to see here in Exodus 15 is Israel's response to what God has done through the Exodus and through the Red Sea. And then we're going to see at the second part of the chapter. We're going to begin in chapter 15 and verse 22. That's going to begin a larger section, which is going to include three separate events where Israel begins to unfortunately show, I don't want to say their true colors, but to show their true colors as a grumbling and complaining people who so quickly forgets what God has done for them. So we'll look at the first of those three events at the end of chapter 15. And then in our read tomorrow through chapter 16 and chapter 17, we'll see those final two events where they again complain and grumble and quickly forget what God has done for them and how he has perfectly provided for them every step of the way up until this point. Thanks again for tuning in on this Sunday. Let me get our text up on the screen for us. And we'll read together what is known by some as the Song of Moses or the Song of Israel. I'm not going to give too much comment on this during our read this morning because I'm going to go back to this text during our worship assembly today and preach through this text, do some more breakdown of the text, some important things that we learn from this text, and how we need to be a people who are constantly remembering how God has done very similar things for us in our lives. So I'm looking forward to that here in just a little bit. But let's begin reading here in Exodus 15 in verse number 1. Exodus 15, verse number 1, then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to Yahweh. They said, I will sing to Yahweh, for he is highly exalted. He has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea. The Lord Yahweh is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him. My father's God, and I will exalt him. Yahweh is a warrior. Yahweh is his name. He threw Pharaoh's chariots and his army into the sea. The elite of his officers were drowned in the Red Sea. The floods covered them, and they sank to the depths like a stone. Yahweh, your right hand is glorious in power. Yahweh, your right hand shattered the enemy. You overthrew your adversary by your great majesty. You unleashed your burning wrath. It consumed them like stubble. The water heaped up at the blast from your nostrils, and the current stood firm like a dam. The watery depths congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake. I will divide the spoil, and my desire will be gratified at their expense. I will draw my sword, and my hand will destroy them. But you blew with your breath, and the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Yahweh, who is like you among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, revered with praises, performing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, and the earth swallowed them. With your faithful love, you will lead the people you have redeemed. You will guide them to your holy dwelling with your strength. When the peoples hear, they will shudder. Anguish will seize the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom will be terrified. Trembling will seize the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan will panic. Terror and dread will fall upon them. They will be still as stone because of your powerful arm until your people pass by, Yahweh, until the people whom you purchased pass by. You will bring them in and plant them on the mountain of your possession. Yahweh, you have prepared the place for your dwelling. Lord, your hands have established a sanctuary. Yahweh will reign forever and ever. When Pharaoh's horses and his chariots and horsemen went into the sea, Yahweh brought the water of the sea back over them. But the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. Then the prophetess Miriam, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women came out following her with tambourines and dancing. Miriam sang to them, sing to them, sing to the Lord, sing to Yahweh, for he is highly exalted. He has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea. Then Moses, verse 22 of Exodus chapter 15, then Moses led Israel on from the Red Sea, and they went out to the wilderness of Shur. They journeyed for 3 days in the wilderness without finding water. They came to Marah, and they could not drink the water at Marah because it was bitter. That is why it was named Marah. The people grumbled to Moses, "What are we going to drink?" So he cried out to Yahweh, and Yahweh showed him a tree. When he threw it into the water became drinkable. Yahweh made a statute and ordinance for them at Marah, and he tested them there. He said, "If you will carefully obey Yahweh your God, do what is right in his sight, pay attention to his commands, and keep all of his statutes, I will not inflict any illness on you that I inflicted on the Egyptians, for I am Yahweh who heals you." Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 date palms, and they camped there by the water. Exodus chapter 15. Again, not too much I'm going to speak about right now about the song itself, except that it has basically two perspectives found within it. That line is created at the end of at the end of verse number 12, where it goes from talking about what God has done to what God is going to do. So that's interesting because they haven't seen these things yet. They have not seen yet the inhabitants of Philistia and Edom and Moab and all the inhabitants of Canaan. They have not yet seen them panic, but they have confidence that they will panic because of what they have already seen from Yahweh. If he can do what he did to the Egyptians, then surely he can do the same thing to those whom they are going to be facing in the future. Now, what's kind of strange about this is that 1 through 18 is the psalm itself, is the song itself. But then in 19, it almost is like it repeats itself. It gives a short recap of what happened in the previous chapter, in chapter 14. And then it says that it is the prophetess Miriam, who is a sister to Aaron and Moses, that it's her who seems to be either leading this song or participating in the song in a very prominent way. And what she does, the song that she sings, at least the way it's recorded for us, is the exact same words that are found in verse number 1. "I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. He has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea." Why would that happen? Why so quickly repeat what has already been stated within this chapter? Well, I think the reason that this is done is it's repeated so quickly to show that this is something that needed and should be repeated among the people of God early and often. If it is seen here within the text, if the song itself is seen within the text, and then it comes right back and emphasizes the text, then how much more do the people, as they move on from the sea, do they need to be continually reminded of what God did at the sea? I think that seems to be the reason for that here. And I think practically speaking, that needs to be the case, because what we're going to see beginning in verse 22 is how quickly do they forget? How quickly Israel forgets about God's ability to provide for them in every single way. It's really, honestly, it's almost impressive how quickly their attitude can change and they can begin to falter in the way that they ought to be thinking. So we get to verse 22 then, and at this point, Israel as a nation has been birthed through the Exodus. They have come through the waters, they have come through the sea, and now they are a nation free of their captors on the other side, and now they have entered into almost the infancy of themselves as a nation. They are infants and they are toddlers, and what we're going to see in this next section as they make their way to the promised land, because they're not going to actually enter the promised land, they're not going to cross the Jordan until like Joshua 3 or something like that. So it's going to be a long time until we get there. So until then, we're going to see them in their really immaturity. And what we're going to see from Yahweh is a great deal of patience. He is going to show a lot of love. He's going to show a lot of patience with their weaknesses and with their really poor decision-making and bad behavior on a number of instances. And yet, again, God has a purpose for them to get them to the land, yet that is going to be, it is going to require a lot of love and patience on his part, beginning here in chapter 15 and verse 22. As they're traveling through the wilderness, it says that they're 3 days into the wilderness, which from their perspective, they might be wondering, okay, this is 3 days, and we still haven't had this festival. And not only have we not had this festival, but we don't even have water. Forget a grand celebration to the Lord. We don't even have what we need. We don't have water to drink. And so they begin at this point to complain, because they're thinking again, the bitterness of this water might remind them of the bitterness of their conditions in Egypt. And they're thinking, well, why bring us out here just to kill us? Kind of like what we saw in the last chapter with them being stuck between the Egyptians and the sea. Why bring us out here if you're not going to give us what we need, if you're not going to provide for us? And yet, with the people grumbling, and in here in chapter 15 and verse number 23, this grumbling, or excuse, verse number 24, is the first use of this word within the narrative of the Exodus journey and trip to Canaan. And we're going to see it on a number of occasions, unfortunately, even so quickly as chapter 16 and verse number 2. But they grumble because, again, they fail to remember what they just sang about. It's been 3 days. They've already forgotten about how God has provided for them. And yet Yahweh in his patience, even with them crying out and with Moses crying out on their behalf to Yahweh, he tells Moses to get this tree and to throw the tree into the water, and the water becomes drinkable. Again, a number of echoes from the Exodus story as well. A tree being wood, similar to the staff of Moses. It's being used in this miraculous event, just as the Lord took water and used it for negative purposes against the Egyptians, turned it into blood in the first plague, and then used the water to drown the Egyptian army at the Red Sea. Now, God is going to show his provisions through water for the people, that he's going to use it as a positive thing for their benefit, and he certainly does this. He uses this occasion to drive a point home, to hopefully instill within them a necessary thing to think about, and a necessary reminder for them to have concerning, again, their need and God's ability to provide and desire to provide for them as his people. So this is the statute and the ordinance that he established for them at Marah. He tested them. He lays it out before them. Here's your opportunity to make the proper choice. If, keyword there, if you will carefully obey Yahweh your God, so obey, do what is right, pay attention to the commands, keep all of his statutes. If you will do those things, which is the opposite of what the Egyptians did, then you will not suffer like the Egyptians did. If you will obey and do what is right towards Yahweh, then you will not suffer as the Egyptians did. Conversely, if you do not carefully obey, if you do not do what is right, if you do not pay attention, if you do not keep all the statutes, then everything that the Egyptians experience, you're going to experience as well. You will be treated like the Egyptians because you behaved like the Egyptians. And that certainly is not something that Yahweh wants for his people to experience. So here is the test very simply laid out. Do what is right. Be faithful to me, trust me, obey me, follow me, and things will turn out very well for you. And almost as a symbol of that happening, we see, to finish out in verse 27, the fact that they come to this place called Elim. Elim is described as a place where there are 12 springs and 70 date palms. This is garden type imagery. This is, I think, a foretaste of what they're going to experience in Canaan. Canaan that is described as a place of milk and honey. That's what they get to experience here. And they, again, experience it here at the point where God gives them the opportunity to make the right choice. Lays out the two paths they can take. Again, do what is right and experience goodness and experience this type of lush, promising environments, or be faithless, don't trust me, and endure the desert and endure the reality of what the Egyptians have experienced. But for them in this moment, here's a reversal of the desert environment. Here's an oasis. Here's a lush environment where they are provided for. So long as they will trust in the Lord, this is what they will be able to experience. And these will be the blessings that they get to enjoy. So unfortunately, as we move on into verse 16 or chapter 16 tomorrow, we're going to see how quickly they forget. And that really is something that I hope we will be learning from in this event. It's just how quickly they forget. How quickly they forget the goodness of God. How quickly they forget the promises that he has made to them. How quickly they forget that he will provide. And because of that, they often find themselves in trouble. May we learn from the Israelites' mistakes of forgetting, not continuing to carry the song that was sung by the sea in their hearts and to live by it. So keep that in mind as we continue through this, and hear a little bit as we gather together for our worship assembly. I'm really excited to speak with you about the song at the sea, the song of Moses, the song of Israel, so that we can learn a lot from it and be reminded of everything that God has done for us. I appreciate you tuning in to this reading on this Sunday morning. Again, really looking forward to being with everyone at our Bible studies and our worship assembly here in a bit. Stay safe, and hope we'll get to enjoy a wonderful time together on this Lord's Day. Thanks for tuning in today. Hope you'll join again tomorrow as we read together in Exodus 16 and 17. Take care, and God bless.